comic book fans, and welcome back to another suddenlycomics.com video, and it is part 2 in my series of Who is Captain Marvel. So just to recap, in February 1940, Whiz Comics number 2 featured the first appearance of a character called Captain Marvel. However, as I explained in the first program, it was decided after a 12-year lawsuit that Fawcett Comics, who had produced Whiz Comics number 2 and Captain Marvel, had infringed the copyrights of Action Comics because it was too similar to Superman, and therefore Fawcett Publications closed up shop, fired all their creators and stopped all their superhero magazines. So you will also remember that in the UK there was a company called L. Miller and Son who had been reproducing Captain Marvel comics because of the ban of ban for bringing in paper publications into the UK following the Second World War. So they then, when Fawcett went under in 1953, they created their own version of Captain Marvel called Marvelman, which ran for 346 issues. It was a weekly comic. However, in 1959, the import of comics and magazines was allowed again, and sales began to drop, and L. Miller and Son eventually stopped all publication, and in fact the company was sold to my favourite Alan Class. Now, the guy who was drawing and writing Marvelman for L. Miller and Son was a man called Mike Anglo, and he eventually fell out with Leonard Miller and his son Arnold, and he actually was commissioned to produce something called Super Hombre in Spain. Anglo began producing Super Hombre in 1958. I think it ran for something like 68 episodes. And then in 1965, the Super Hombre was rebranded as Miracle Man for Thorpe and Porter in the UK, which ran for I think 17 or 18 episodes. Right, okay, now let's just take a little breather, because also what happened is, so we're going back across to America now, and unfortunately DC completely dropped the ball, and nobody renewed the trademark for Captain Marvel. So in 1967, some bright spark at Marvel realised this, and they trademarked the Captain Marvel name. And they began producing a comic called Captain Marvel. This is Captain Marvel. He first appears in Marvel Superheroes number 12. Okay, so Marvel get the name Captain Marvel. Right. Over at DC, somebody realised that they'd messed up, and in 1972, I think, they bought all the licenses that Fawcett used to own, including the license for the original Captain Marvel, but of course the name had been trademarked. So they started producing that. I think this dates from 1973. This is the first issue of Shazam. In terms of spec, I think this comic is great spec. This is effectively the first appearance of Captain Marvel in DC Comics. It's also the first appearance of Shazam. Right, so we now have three routes to pursue in terms of trying to work out who Captain Marvel is. We have got the UK version, Marvelman. We have got Marvel Comics, who now own the trademark to the name Captain Marvel and have started producing a comic called Captain Marvel, and DC Comics, who've now taken over all the Fawcett Publications trademarks, including the trademark to Shazam. So we've got three routes to follow here. For this episode, I am going to pursue the UK route, and I will pursue the DC and Marvel routes in episode 3. So, in the UK, once L. Miller and Son had stopped doing Marvelman, it lagged in 1963. It effectively dropped off until in 1982, a guy called Des Skin, who used to run Marvel UK, set up a comic called Warrior. This was in 1982, and as part of this, he decided to revive Marvelman. That you see down here, it says from present day Britain, a hero reborn, with a question mark on it. So this is effectively Marvelman, and after some toing and froing, the author he gets for this is Alan Moore. And you can see issue 2 here of Warrior, and here we have Marvelman, and you can see his phrase here, Kimota, which turns him from somebody ordinary into a Marvelman. And as I said, the magnificent Alan Moore takes up the writing of Marvelman in Warrior magazine. Right, so however, as Alan is not the most easy person in the world to get on with, and he fell out with Des Skin, and also Wizard magazine stopped at issue 24. However, Des licensed Marvelman to Eclipse Comics in the States. And they rebranded it. So basically these reprinted the stories from Wizard magazine by Alan Moore, but they renamed him Miracle Man so as not to annoy Marvel in the States. And it's interesting that they took the name Miracle Man. I wonder if they were influenced by the Thorpe and Porter Miracle Man from 1965. Who knows? So this is a great series. I've got all these Eclipse comics. I've also got quite a lot of the original Wizard comics. This is one of my favourite superhero stories by Alan Moore. You know, it's got a number of great themes here. With this, it's probably our first time we see a superhero instilling fear, and we have a sympathetic villain. So Eclipse started producing Miracle Man, and it went up to the Moore stuff took them up to issue 16. I mean, this is just a great issue and a great cover, and one could argue that this is the end of the Alan Moore Miracle Man arc. So it was being quite successful for Eclipse, and therefore they decided to continue the Miracle Man story, and it continues written by Neil Gaiman with art by Mark Buckingham in issue 17. I mean, this is why it makes it one of the greatest series ever. We've got two great writers, Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman. There we go. Here's Mr. Gaiman, and this is where he gets involved in this story. And they went through to issue 24, but unfortunately, Eclipse Comics folded at this stage. So that was the end of Miracle Man at this point in time. And who is this gentleman here? This gentleman here is Todd McFarlane, of Image Comics and Spawn fame. And in 1996, Todd McFarlane purchased the Eclipse creative assets, including, he thought, Miracle Man, for $25,000. Anyway, in 2001, Todd started talking about putting Miracle Man into Image Comics, and in fact he did actually put Mike Moran did appear in Hellspawn issue 6. However, at the same time, Mr. McFarlane and Mr. Gaiman were falling out. So Mr. Gaiman had written a few comics for Mr. McFarlane, and he had created a character called Angela in Spawn number 9. And given that Todd McFarlane started Image Comics to give creators rights, it is strange that he ended up in a court battle with Neil Gaiman over the ownership of Spawn. Plus, Neil Gaiman also said that he didn't believe that Todd McFarlane had the rights to Miracle Man or Marvel Man because he didn't believe they were owned by Eclipse. So here we go, and we have another legal battle for the ownership of Miracle Man and Marvel Man, which goes on for a number of years until 2009, when it is decided that actually the person who owns the rights to Marvel Man, and you are not going to believe this, it is Mike Anglo. Yes, Mike Anglo. Remember Mike Anglo? Let's go right back to the 1953 when Mike Anglo began writing Marvel Man for L. Miller and Son. He did put a copyright on it on some of the publications, and it was decided that Mike Anglo was the rightful trademark owner of Marvel Man. In 2009, Marvel bought the rights for Marvel Man from Mike Anglo. At this stage, Mike Anglo was about 93 or 94, and he died 2 years later in 2011. But it was delightful that Mike Anglo was the final beneficiary of this. And this was produced by Marvel. I think in 2010 it was a Marvel Man primer, and in it Joe Quesada interviews Marvel Man creator Mick Anglo. Fantastic stuff. So we've come full circle with Marvel now owning Marvel Man, and they also purchased the rights to Miracle Man in 2000, and I think it was 2013. So Marvel now own Captain Marvel, Marvel Man and Miracle Man, and in Marvel Comics 1000 Miracle Man gets his own page in here. Right, it's also getting very exciting because recently this came out in December of 2021, and in here there is the Miracle Man logo. Are we going to get Miracle Man in the mainstream Marvel comics? It would seem possibly we are. Okay, so here endeth the second part of my story about who is Captain Marvel. I hope you've all followed that. Basically, we followed the line of the UK Marvelman in this episode. In the next episode, I am going to follow the timelines of Captain Marvel in Marvel Comics and Shazam in DC Comics. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please press the like button, subscribe, notify, do all those good things, and enough said.